You are not chosen to be broken. You were chosen to be awakened. There are moments in life when the pain is so unbearable, the confusion so relentless, that you begin to question everything: your worth, your sanity, your discernment, even your faith. And for those who have walked through the furnace of a relationship with a demonic narcissist, that moment of questioning is not just fleeting. It becomes a daily torment. You ask yourself, how did I not see it? Why did I stay? How could someone I loved become the face of cruelty, manipulation, and spiritual emptiness? But I submit to you today, this was not punishment. This was not abandonment. This was not God turning his back on you. On the contrary, this was the moment he began unveiling the divine blueprint hidden in the very wreckage the enemy thought would destroy you. This was not just about survival. It was about being set apart. You were pulled into a battle not because you were weak, but because there was something in you the darkness wanted to extinguish. And the very fact that you are still standing, still breathing, still seeking truth, is evidence that the enemy failed, and God is just getting started. Let us now explore what that plan looks like. 1. You were not randomly targeted, you were spiritually identified. Some people walk through life asking, why did this happen to me? But for those who've battled a narcissist with a demonic presence, the better question might be, why did the darkness see me in the first place? And that question, haunting as it may seem, holds the first key to your healing. You were not chosen for destruction because you were weak. You were targeted because you were radiant. Not in the way the world defines it. Not loud, not boastful, not obvious. But in the quiet, steady way that makes the unseen world tremble. There was something about you even you didn't fully understand. A gentleness that didn't mean passivity. A loyalty that wasn't blindness. A spirit that, though tired, never surrendered to bitterness. You carried a light you didn't even know you had, but hell recognized it the moment you stepped into the room. And the narcissist? They weren't just drawn to your kindness, your empathy, or your presence. They were drawn to the power you carried without even knowing it. The power of innocence preserved through trials. The power of insight that saw beneath the surface. The power of a soul still tethered to God, even if barely. The evil never attacks what is empty. It attacks what is eternal. And make no mistake, the war you found yourself in was not about love. It was not about misunderstanding or miscommunication. It was about a spiritual invasion. You didn't invite it, you didn't deserve it, but you were born with a calling that made it inevitable. This is what they don't tell you when you grow up in the faith, that sometimes the anointing on your life will provoke attacks you never asked for, that sometimes your goodness will not protect you from cruelty, but attract it, that the devil doesn't just oppose loud preachers or obvious warriors. He comes after the quiet ones too, the ones who love deeply, hope silently, serve faithfully, and pray when no one is watching, because those are the ones that carry the most eternal threat. And so it came for you, not with fangs and fire, but with flattery and false promises. It came wearing the face of love, the words of destiny, the warmth of connection. And by the time you saw behind the mask, it had already begun to drain you, not just emotionally, but spiritually, piece by piece, lie by lie, until the reflection in the mirror looked less like you and more like someone who'd forgotten how to breathe. But even then, even in the middle of the confusion, the gaslighting, the fear, something in you refused to die. You may not have known it, but heaven did. You may have felt like a victim, but God saw a vessel. The battle you were dragged into was not punishment. It was an awakening. The narcissist may have thought they chose you, but what they didn't realize was that they were permitted only to reveal what God had already seen in you all along: strength, purpose, light, and a holy resilience. They didn't break you, they exposed you, not to shame, but to truth. And I know it didn't feel like truth. It felt like betrayal. It felt like death. It felt like praying to a silent sky, loving someone who weaponized your love, and losing parts of yourself you never thought could be taken. But even as you sank into despair, you weren't falling. You were being stripped, not of your value, not of your identity, but of the illusions that once blinded you to who you truly are. C.S. Lewis wrote, "Pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains." And he was shouting then, not to shame you, not to punish you, but to awaken the warrior within you. The enemy saw your light and tried to devour it, but instead of extinguishing your soul, they only helped uncover it. Like fire refining gold, your suffering burned away the fear, the fog, the falsehoods, and revealed someone the enemy never wanted you to meet. You, the real you, the anointed you, the you that remembers. You are chosen. So no, you were not randomly targeted. The darkness identified something divine in you, and it came to kill it. But what the enemy didn't realize is that God had already claimed you long before the storm. And if you feel like you've been through hell, it's only because heaven's plan for your life provoked hell's resistance. You are not forgotten. You are not foolish. You are not ruined. You are recognized by heaven, and the enemy knows it. 2. Darkness only shows up where there is light. If you've ever wondered why the narcissist entered your life with such intensity, why the connection felt otherworldly, almost supernatural, you are not alone. So many survivors echo the same aching words. It felt like fate, and in a way it was, but not the fate you dreamed of. It wasn't destiny sent to fulfill your heart. It was darkness drawn to extinguish your light. You see, spiritual warfare does not begin with swords and shouting. It begins quietly, with charm, with flattery, with false peace. The enemy does not announce himself. He imitates love until you're too deep to notice the cage. But here is the spiritual paradox. Evil does not pursue emptiness. It is drawn to presence. The narcissist didn't choose you because you were broken. They chose you because you were bright, because your soul, even in its loneliness, even in its need, still reflected the image of God. That reflection was intolerable to the demonic force working behind the narcissist's eyes. You didn't just offer them attention, you offered them access to something sacred, and they tried to swallow it. But what you need to understand now is this: their arrival in your life was not proof of your weakness. It was proof that your light was real. You were already spiritually dangerous, even if you didn't know it yet. You were already shaking the foundations of darkness simply by existing, with purity, by loving without agenda, by forgiving when it hurt. That kind of soul cannot go unnoticed, not by heaven and not by hell. C.S. Lewis warned us that there are unseen realities more real than the visible ones, and you were living inside one of those realities. The narcissist was not just a difficult person, they were a vessel, a host, a counterfeit sent to suppress something holy in you before it could rise. And they nearly succeeded, because let's be honest, they were good at what they did. They studied your weaknesses. They mirrored your dreams. They seduced your hope. They baptized you in illusion and called it intimacy. You weren't foolish to fall. You were targeted with precision. And that's what hurts the most, isn't it? That the thing that nearly killed you came disguised as the one who claimed they loved you most. But here's the good news. It didn't destroy you. It bruised you. It shattered your illusions. It burned the flesh of your old identity. But it could not touch your spirit. Why? Because your spirit was preserved by God, protected even in the fire, watched over even in the deception, cradled even in the nights you thought you were completely alone. Do you remember those nights? The ones where you stared at the ceiling, your chest heavy with unexplainable dread? That was not ordinary heartbreak. That was your soul screaming for help while being spiritually choked. And yet, even then, something in you refused to surrender. You stayed, you prayed, you tried, you endured. You endured not because you were naive, but because you were built for something more. And the darkness knew that. That's why it fought so hard to keep you confused, to keep you small, to keep you tied to a lie. But truth, even when buried, will always rise. And when it did, you began to see it. You saw how your peace became their playground. You saw how your empathy became your bondage. You saw how love, real love, was never actually present. And that awakening, that terrible, gut-wrenching, holy awakening, that was God calling you out of the cave. The narcissist didn't expect you to survive the fog. They didn't expect you to walk through the fire. But they underestimated something ancient and indestructible inside you, the image of your Creator. You began to see clearly, not because you became harder, but because you became wiser. Your eyes changed. Your prayers deepened. Your presence began to carry the fragrance of one who had wrestled darkness and lived to testify. And let me tell you what darkness hates more than anything: a healed soul that now sees it coming. The narcissist wasn't just a detour. They were a revelation. They revealed not only their own emptiness, but your depth. Not only their demonic alliance, but your divine assignment. And though it took everything in you to break free, now you know. Darkness doesn't just show up anywhere. It shows up where the light is strongest. And beloved, that light is you. So the next time the memory of them tries to haunt you, tries to tell you that you were easy prey, weak or foolish, remember this: they didn't come because you were nothing. They came because you were everything they could never be. You were love they couldn't feel. You were purity they couldn't corrupt. You were spirit they couldn't control. And now that you've escaped, the same light they tried to snuff out has grown brighter than ever before. 3. The narcissist's plan was your crucifixion, but God's plan was your resurrection. There is a kind of pain that doesn't just visit your emotions. It invades your identity. When you loved the narcissist, you didn't simply give them your heart. You gave them access to your trust, your memories, your hopes, and in many ways, your spiritual clarity. Slowly and deliberately, they took what was sacred and twisted it into confusion. But this wasn't just heartbreak. This wasn't just the collapse of a relationship. This was a form of crucifixion, an intentional dismantling of your sense of self. They stripped you of confidence, blamed you for their chaos, and reduced you until you questioned your worth, your mind, even your faith. What they were after wasn't affection, it was dominion, and they came close to achieving it. But God, in His sovereignty, does not allow the destruction of his children without purpose. The narcissist's plan may have been to crucify your soul, but God's plan was always resurrection. He permitted the breaking, not because you deserved pain, but because he knew what would rise from the ashes would be far more powerful than what stood before. The enemy wanted to kill your purpose before it could grow, to silence your voice before it could speak healing, and to bury your spirit before it could become light for others. But what the enemy didn't see, and what the narcissist underestimated, was that your soul had already been claimed by heaven. God allowed you to walk through that fire not because he abandoned you, but because he was forging something eternal within you. The resurrection God had in store was not just about surviving the abuse. It was about transforming you into someone the enemy could no longer manipulate. Your clarity now cuts through lies. Your spirit now senses what once deceived you, and that is the power of the cross, not that it avoids pain, but that it makes pain submit to glory. C.S. Lewis once said that hardships often prepare ordinary people for extraordinary destinies. What you endured was not meant to make you bitter, it was meant to awaken you. Every tear became oil, every betrayal became a lesson, every sleepless night became a refining moment where your soul learned to hear the voice of God again. Not through sermons, not through religion, but in the lonely, painful, unlit spaces where your cry became prayer and your silence became surrender. You didn't come out of that relationship untouched. No, you carry scars. But those scars are not symbols of defeat, they are marks of resurrection. They are signs that you died to illusions, to codependency, to deception, and were reborn in truth, discernment, and spiritual strength. You may still tremble, you may still have moments of grief, but trembling is not weakness. Even the resurrected Christ still bore his wounds, and yet he rose. Your story doesn't end at the betrayal. It doesn't end at the breaking point. It begins the moment you realize that the crucifixion you endured was never your burial. It was your beginning. The narcissists thought they had the final word, but they were merely an unknowing tool in a far greater plan. The unveiling of who you truly are. That unveiling begins with this truth: you are not who you were. You are not naive. You are not lost. You are not broken beyond repair. You are someone who walked through darkness, saw evil up close, tasted emotional death, and still had the courage to stand back up and say, I choose light. That's not just survival. That is the resurrection power of God. 4. You are awakened to see the unseen, to discern the spirits. There is a moment in every survivor's journey when the veil begins to lift. At first it's subtle, a gut feeling you can't explain, a quiet whisper in the soul that something isn't right. Then come the contradictions, the lies, the strange emptiness behind their words, the coldness behind their touch, and then finally clarity. A painful, holy clarity that sears through every illusion and reveals what was always there. This wasn't just emotional abuse. This was a spiritual violation. You weren't just misled, you were spiritually ambushed. When you were with a narcissist, you weren't merely confused by a complicated personality. You were up against something far more calculated, a force that mimicked love while feeding off your light. It felt human, but the impact was otherworldly. Your joy faded without cause. Your mind became fogged without explanation. You questioned everything, even when you had done nothing wrong. That kind of internal collapse doesn't come from simple dysfunction. It comes from spiritual disorientation. But here is where the divine reversal began. Even in your confusion, God was speaking. Even when you couldn't name what was happening, your spirit was beginning to discern. That unsettling feeling wasn't anxiety, it was the Holy Spirit pressing truth into your bones. That sudden nausea after talking to them, that wasn't emotional instability. It was your soul warning you, there is something unclean here. And what a holy gift that discernment became. At first you resented it. You wanted to go back to the days when you believed in the illusion. You missed the version of yourself that didn't flinch at manipulation or second-guess every gut instinct. But in time you realized this new awareness was not a curse. It was your awakening. God wasn't punishing you by revealing the evil behind the mask. He was elevating you. He was opening your eyes to spiritual dimensions others never see. He was teaching you the language of light and darkness so that no deception could ever entangle you again. C.S. Lewis wrote in The Great Divorce, "There are only two kinds of people in the end, those who say to God, 'Thy will be done,' and those to whom God says, 'In the end, thy will be done.'" You were on a path, perhaps unknowingly, where you were about to let go of truth in the name of love, of holiness in the name of loyalty. But God interrupted your descent, not with thunder. He didn't shout over the narcissist's lies. He whispered into your soul, and you heard him. That's the power of spiritual awakening. You begin to see through what once seduced you. You recognize emptiness behind charm. You feel the chill in their compliments. You smell the falseness in their promises. And perhaps most painfully, you stop romanticizing what once destroyed you. You are no longer blind. You are no longer asleep. You are no longer available for the counterfeit. And now, your discernment is not just a shield, it's a ministry. You can walk into rooms and feel what others miss. You can look into someone's eyes and know when the spirit is off. You carry spiritual authority, not because you studied theology, but because you survived demonic entanglement and came out wiser, clearer, and closer to God. The enemy hoped you'd stay confused, but you emerged with prophetic sight. And yes, there's grief that comes with seeing. There's loneliness in being the one who recognizes what others dismiss. But there's also a power that cannot be undone. You now walk with eyes that see beneath surfaces and ears that hear what isn't said. And that's not paranoia, that's spiritual maturity. So don't apologize for being cautious. Don't shrink back when others call you too sensitive. You are not sensitive. You are discerning. You are not bitter. You are awake. You are not cold. You are protected. You paid for this clarity with your very soul, and God has redeemed it to preserve your future. The enemy thought your mind would stay shackled, but now your spirit sees with holy vision. You were once prey. Now you are a watchman on the wall. That, my love, is the beginning of wisdom. 5, you were not just healed, you were recommissioned. It is one thing to escape. It is another thing entirely to emerge. Survival is often the first goal of the wounded soul. To breathe again, to sleep without fear, to wake up and not immediately feel the weight of confusion on your chest. But God's desire for you has never been mere survival. He did not walk with you through the valley of manipulation, abandonment, and spiritual assault, simply to return you to where you started. Your mother. What the enemy tried to use to destroy you, God is now using to recommission you. You see, healing was only phase 1. The end goal was never just to stitch up your wounds and make you smile again. The deeper purpose was to transform your pain into a platform, to take what was meant for evil and turn it into a weapon of deliverance, not just for you, but for others still trapped in this same darkness you once called love. What you carry now is not just wisdom, it is authority, the kind of authority that doesn't come from education or experience alone, but from intimate war with darkness. You carry in your spirit the memory of gaslight and guilt, of loneliness in a full room, of praying to God in whispers because you didn't want to be overheard. But those memories have become your oil. They anoint your words, they anoint your presence, they radiate through your discernment, they make you dangerous. Not to people, but to lies, deception, and spiritual manipulation. C.S. Lewis once said, "Courage, dear heart," and that's exactly what you had. Even when it didn't feel like it. You kept showing up, you kept praying, you kept hoping, you kept loving, and now in the aftermath, you've been entrusted with more than just restoration. You've been entrusted with assignment. And what does that assignment look like? It looks like speaking when others are too afraid to name the evil they lived through. It looks like offering language to those whose experiences left them mute. It looks like walking into spiritual battle for people who don't even know they're at war. It looks like carrying the torch of truth into places that have been silent for too long. You're not just someone who went through something. You are now a vessel of clarity. And don't be surprised when others come to you, not because you advertised your story, but because your spirit bears witness with their suffering. They feel it. They recognize the difference in your presence. You don't speak with bitterness, you speak with breakthrough. You don't carry vengeance, you carry victory. You don't demand attention, you command atmosphere. That's what happens when God turns your wounds into weapons and your story into strategy. And yes, the narcissists thought they ruined you. But they didn't realize that the very hell they unleashed only trained you to stand on holy ground. What they thought would silence you only gave your voice eternal resonance. What they hoped would make you small has now made you unignorable. But don't miss this. Being recommissioned doesn't mean you won't still feel the pain sometimes. Healing does not erase the history, but it rewrites the ending. And that's what matters. Because now you know, you didn't just walk away, you were called out. You didn't just recover, you were recalibrated. You didn't just leave, you were launched. And your life, from this point forward, will never again belong to illusion. It belongs to truth, to purpose, to divine fire that cannot be faked or extinguished. So stand tall, not as someone who was merely healed, but as someone who was sent back into the world with eyes that see, a heart that discerns, and a mission that hell fears. You're not the same. You were never meant to be. 6. Your healing is a threat to hell. There is something the enemy hopes you never discover. That your healing is not just personal, it's prophetic. Every step you take toward wholeness, every lie you reject, every time you choose truth over illusion, you aren't just mending yourself, you are waging war. You are reclaiming territory that the enemy thought was his. And for hell, that is terrifying. You may not feel like a warrior, you may still be tender, still carrying the bruises, still waking up from nightmares you can't always name. But the fact that you are here, that you've endured, that you've chosen to continue forward instead of collapsing, that makes you dangerous. Because now you're walking in something the narcissist never expected you to find. Spiritual authority born of affliction. In their world, healing is impossible. Change is an illusion. They wear masks because they are hollow inside. And in that emptiness, they believed you would end up just like them, bitter, broken, shut down, spiritually numb. They assumed their betrayal would leave you with nothing but a shell of the person you used to be. But you did something radical. You chose to rise. Not quickly, not perfectly, but steadily, day by day, prayer by prayer, tear by tear. You kept going. You let the pain burn away what was false. You let the silence teach you how to hear God again. You let the emptiness become the altar where something new could be born. And what was born in that sacred space is what hell cannot touch. A healed identity anchored in truth. God cannot give us peace and happiness apart from Himself because it is not there. There is not such thing. There is no such thing. That is what you've discovered in this process, not just recovery, but reunion. A deeper intimacy with God, a security not based on being loved by others, but on being known by your Creator. You've stopped chasing validation and started drinking from the living well that never runs dry. And that is the kind of healing that makes demons tremble. You see, it's not just that you walked away from the narcissist, it's that you walked away from the need to be seen by them. You no longer look for closure where there is no soul. You no longer try to prove your worth to the one who was sent to dismantle it. That's what terrifies the enemy. Not that you left, but that you no longer need what once held you captive. And now? Now you're walking with eyes wide open, and a spirit that can sense lies before they speak. You've been recalibrated. You know what peace feels like again. You know what God's voice sounds like. And you will never again confuse manipulation for love or control for protection. You've crossed a threshold, and on the other side of that threshold is freedom. But this freedom is not soft, it's not passive, it's holy and therefore disruptive. It shakes foundations, it speaks truth where silence has reigned. It walks into rooms and exposes hidden agendas without saying a word. That's what your healing has done. It has not just restored you, it has made you formidable in the spirit. And that's why the attacks didn't stop the moment you walked away. That's why the warfare sometimes intensified after you left. Because your healing sent a signal to hell that you are no longer under its influence. You're no longer available for deception. You're no longer a prisoner of shame or confusion. You are aligned with heaven now, and that makes you unstoppable. So don't diminish your progress. Don't rush your process. And don't mistake quiet seasons for weakness. Healing is holy, and holiness shakes the kingdom of darkness to its core. Every scar you carry is a reminder. The enemy tried to destroy you, but God used it to rebuild you stronger. Your healing is not just for you, it's a weapon. And when wielded with humility and truth, it becomes a force the enemy cannot withstand. So keep rising, keep trusting, keep walking with God, because every healed part of you is now a testament that darkness doesn't get the final say. And your presence, whole, aware, spiritually awake, is the proof that heaven always wins.